Okay, my name is Mark Hyman. I am the director of the Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism at Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. And I'm delighted to be introducing tonight's panel on a wonderful investigative project undertaken by the Povich Center and the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism. I want to let you know that we're recording tonight's session. And I'd also want to encourage you to submit questions to the Q&A so that at the end of tonight's panel, Shannon Scoville can ask your question of the panel. So again, I want to welcome everyone to the panel and say good evening. I'm particularly thrilled to meet the panelists tonight because as one of the editors on the project, I've been hearing about these people and reading about their stories for months and months. And to see them virtually in the flesh tonight is very exciting for me. So welcome to all of you. This project was a major undertaking. We believe that it's the deepest dive into the subject of Title IX and high schools that has ever occurred. We think it's the most comprehensive series of stories on high schools and Title IX ever. The project consists of 12 stories, video pieces, a national poll of 1,000 parents and students, and more than that. And I want to give credit to the team here at Merrill College that's responsible for that reporting. We sometimes say at Merrill that we can devote more resources to a project than almost any news organization in the country. And for this project, I think that's true. There were 20 student reporters who worked on this project for 4 to 5 months, and many faculty members who contributed their expertise in data, in design, and photography, and video. So it was truly a team effort. And at times it felt like the captain of that team was Shannon Scoville, without whom I don't think we would be here today. So I want to introduce our moderator for tonight, a PhD candidate at Merrill College, the amazing teaching assistant for the Gender Equity and Title IX course last fall, Shannon Scoville. So Shannon, it's up to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really excited to be here. This project was a labor of love, and it's really exciting to have the opportunity to continue the conversation tonight with our incredible panelists. I'd like to quickly introduce them, and then I will get started with some of our questions tonight. First up, we have Kim Turner. Kim is the director of the Gender Equity Initiative at Positive Coaching Alliance and a former senior staff attorney at Legal Aid for Work. Next, we have PBS featured star, Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary is a social studies teacher at Rancho Buena Vista High School in Vista, California. And his unit on Title IX inspired 2 softball players in his course, which I'm sure we'll hear about more tonight, to speak up for their rights and advocate for a new softball field on campus. Next up, we have Angela Morgan in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Angela is the president of the softball booster club at Stillwater High School and one of the parents involved in a Title IX lawsuit that called for improved softball facilities at the school. Madyson Roach similarly involved in a lawsuit advocating for improved facilities at her high school in Grant High School, where she graduated in 2021. And last but not least, we have Emily Riley, a student reporter on the project, who produced an impressive piece on publicity that I encourage you all to read after this panel concludes. The first topic I want to talk about tonight, we have a great group of people that I'm sure will offer a range of perspectives on this, but one of the main themes that came from our reporting was the lack of education around Title IX. In fact, our national poll of 1,000 parents and students showed that more than half of parents and 3/4 of students know nothing at all about the law. So I'd like to get the panel's reaction to that statement. What surprises you about that? Was that what you expected? We can start with you, Kim. I know you have tons of expertise on Title IX education. So how do you respond to that statistic?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shannon. And I just want to applaud everybody involved in this amazing project. It's unprecedented, and I think will really change the game for our high school girls, because once we know that there's a lack of awareness and equity and compliance under Title IX, we can do something about it. So thank you. In terms of education, I can say that in my 10 plus years working on Title IX, especially in K-12 schools, it is a real challenge that many kids, girls, coaches, school officials, parents, guardians do not know what Title IX is, plain and simple. At this point, I think this is the beginning because we can identify that knowledge gap and work on it. I did appreciate so much the points in that story that, people are getting their information online, for example. And so we need to think about that and make sure that information is accessible, is accurate, as the internet can sometimes lead folks astray, and engaging. I mean, I think one of the challenges is that we're talking about students when we're trying to educate about rights. So we can't have a dry, boring, technical, legal, 3-hour webinar. We need engaging infographics and video material and in-person discussion in schools. So I would say that the format and the substance are both key. And it doesn't take a lot, to educate parents, guardians, kids, and school staff and officials on the law. It's not that complicated. It's pretty intuitive, in fact. So there's a lot we can do, and I'm happy to expand more on that. But I appreciate highlighting the inequity in education and awareness, and highlighting more what we can do about it.
Yes, thank you. Madyson, you were one of those high school students not that long ago. When did you first learn about Title IX?
I first learned about Title IX probably my freshman year of high school, so that was 2017. And when it was addressed to me in regards to the field, I had no idea what they were talking about. I kind of just sat in the back and listened like I was a freshman. And I was also surrounded by older girls because I was on varsity. So I just really took the back seat. And when my coach Debbie brought it up to me, because she was like, you're gonna be here for the next 4 years. If we go forward with this, you could be a lead on it. You could educate other people. So I think Debbie really put it in my ear, and she gave me all the information I needed. I think I'm still learning to this day more information and details about Title IX that I never really knew. And yeah, so it was all pretty new to me. It was pretty shocking, but I'm happy that I have an understanding now.
Yeah, definitely. Angela, how much background did you have on Title IX when you were involved in the lawsuit in Stillwater? I think you're on mute.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
I think I'm one of the older panelists. So I was very fortunate to have some knowledge coming in from going to high school and also in college. But we had a lawsuit that was similar to ours, filed about, I'm going to say 15 to 20 years ago, in a community about maybe an hour north of Stillwater. So I think that helped us a little bit because we could draw on their expertise and knowledge and an attorney there. So that kind of helped us get a little more educated in Title IX.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. And Emily, you have been deeply involved in this for a long time. How much Title IX background did you have going into this course?
Unfortunately, I would say very little. I didn't play sports in high school, but I think something that was really evident for everyone in the class is that a lot of people know about the violations of Title IX before they actually know anything about Title IX. Almost anyone, even for me, not being someone who played sports in high school, I knew one or two, if that, people, if not many more, who had violations of Title IX that they experienced while they were a girl playing high school sports. So I think when I first started to learn more about Title IX, it was when I was probably a senior in high school or a freshman in college. But I already knew about it. Like Kim said, it's very intuitive. When something's not quite on the same level playing field, as we say in the story, but you don't always know how to address that, or that there's actually a law that will, uphold that.
We got to watch in action on Monday night the story of two students who learned about Title IX in a classroom. Tim, when did you start teaching about Title IX in your classroom, and what advice would you give for teachers that want to follow your example?
I'm afraid to admit this, but I started teaching it in 1991 because I actually lived through Title IX taking place on my high school campus when I was a senior in high school. I played water polo and soccer. we had 1 female water polo player, and we had 0 female soccer players. And it wasn't as if there weren't athletes on campus, but they weren't coming out because there weren't girls teams. The 1 female water polo player was mean, tough, and she felt comfortable in the pool playing against boys, and no one else did. Even her participation did not kind of inspire other people to come out. And you had this entire half of the school not getting to participate. And then all of a sudden we had girls teams. My senior year, we had a girls soccer team. We had a girls water polo team. We're looking around going, where did this come from? And we were taught Title IX. And I think that carried over to when I became a teacher. I saw something in the textbook about equal opportunity, and I went straight to that topic that I had seen happen in front of my eyes, and I've been using it since 1991. But it just took students like Danny and Sydney to bring that lesson to life. So I know I'm the one on the panel, but you're going to keep hearing me talking about Danny and Sydney.
That's awesome. What was it like for you to watch their story play out on national television earlier this week?
Well, just getting the text from them about this. Oh, we're in this paper, we're in that paper, we're in this paper. They're on cloud 9 right now. So they're, they're loving this. I want to come to Madyson and Angela though. It was a success story, but our district got lucky. And it was the luck that we were in the middle of a bond issue, and they had an opportunity to slate that softball field into the bond. And if we hadn't passed that bond, I think I might be on this panel like Angela. In the middle of teaching students going through a lawsuit instead. That's that funding. It all came down to the fact that they had a way out. The Title IX talk in the speech that the students gave at the school board definitely got the district moving, but I don't know if the story is the same if the bond's not there.
Yes, thank you. Well, that's a great transition, Angela, into your story. What ultimately led you to filing the lawsuit?
So I have an older daughter that also played softball. So we have about 10 years wrapped up in the Stillwater High School softball program. Our junior high team is also there, of course. So we've been seeing the inequalities for a long time, and it wasn't just the inequalities for the girls. Our facility was not ADA compliant. We had handicapped people that couldn't find seating. They couldn't navigate the sidewalks. The facility itself was just kind of a wreck. So we had sent all the emails, we had made all the phone calls, we had meeting after meeting after meeting, and we just couldn't get anywhere. They told us a lot of things that we all wanted to hear. I think that happens a lot in regards to cases like ours. And after a while, you just realize nothing's going to happen. So you have to press that nuclear option, which for us was a Title IX lawsuit.
Yeah, you've talked previously about the emotional toll that this lawsuit took on you. Were you concerned about the impact of the lawsuit on your daughter?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reason we were doing this was for our daughter. So that's a huge concern of ours. Sydney was a junior when we filed this lawsuit. And 2 things really go into that. We knew that it was probably going to be a lengthy process, and any of the improvements that we would get, our daughters probably wouldn't even be able to take advantage of those. But she was also going through the recruiting process. She's very fortunate. She works hard and had colleges reaching out to her. And in the back of our minds, we were worried, what if someone at our high school was upset and called the college student and our college coach and said things about her? We also faced a little bit of repercussions, our coaches, our players. It was definitely something that was a huge concern, but she weathered the storm pretty well.
What advice would you give to parents experiencing or seeing similar inequities at high schools in their area?
One of the things that worked to our advantage is that we took pictures and documented everything. We couldn't rely on people being honest with their phone conversations with us. So we stopped communicating at one point through phone calls, which is sad, but we had to have documentation. Anyone should be able to ask for budgets at their school. It took us a long time for them to provide us with those. Collect all the information that you can and try the meetings, go the route. There are good people there that want to do the right thing. In our case, they didn't. And be ready for a battle. And there's a possibility that you or your child or your coach is going to face some backlash. Ours definitely did.
Madyson, what about you? Were you worried about the impact that this could have on your team or your friends when you were involved in the lawsuit at Grant?
I think it was a consideration, but by the time that the lawsuit was getting filed, I didn't care how anyone felt. I had reached my point. I was like, I'm kind of over this. I wasn't really playing softball anymore because of COVID. So like we had already missed our season. Just like how Angela said, we were told so many lies. Information wasn't being provided when we asked. And my coach has been at Grant for over 20 years. So this has been her whole life. She's been trying to do this. My first softball practice at Grant, we practiced in the tennis courts actually, because we had nowhere to practice. The boys had their own field, so we had to practice in the tennis courts. We had sliding practice like down a hill next to the tennis courts. So like it really was very unfair, but at the time I didn't even realize, like I was like, okay, tennis courts practice, like okay, that's fine. Like can't really run that much, so we're just gonna be like hitting balls and stuff. So it really took me a while to like actually see the wrongdoings of my school and like put my foot down. And everyone on the team was very supportive. And the backlash is definitely something you have to think about. But when I was considering all of the everything to whether or not I would do the lawsuit, all the good outweighed the bad. So I was like, forget the backlash, forget what people have to say, like we might as well.
Definitely. What is the biggest thing you learned both about your rights under Title IX and about your ability to speak up in those situations from this experience?
Yeah, I definitely learned to use my voice more because I always like thought something was wrong with what was going on, but I never really like had the courage to say it. And I also like didn't really think much about it. Like I said, I just kind of like went with the flow. So definitely using my voice, and like Angela said, there are good people that do want to help. So if you keep on using your voice and talking to people and getting word out, like it'll come back, and like those people will come to help. So as much as you can, just speak up for what you believe in.
Thank you so much. Emily, building a new softball field can cost upwards of $1 million, but there are inequities that still happen when money isn't involved. Could you tell us a little bit about your research on publicity and why you think this is still an issue for girls and boys in high school?
Absolutely. Publicity was so interesting to read about because, like you said, it doesn't always cost money. And if it does cost money, it's surely not as much money as it would to put in a new field or get new uniforms or hire more coaches or better coaches. But it's still something that's so unequal in high schools. And I think a lot of that has to do with people thinking that it's not an important issue. But I think it's a conversation of it not being as much of a visible issue versus importance. For example, looking at a field that is so torn up that it's causing injuries for the girls that play on it, that's extremely visible. Having uniforms that you've had for a decade while the boys get new uniforms every single year, that's something very visible. Whereas publicity can kind of go under the radar in terms of what you see and evidence that you can provide that you're not getting equal publicity. But something that I found is that it still means a lot for girls to not be represented. And that means that if the school, has a Facebook or a Twitter account where the athletic director or someone at the school goes to cover games or publicize about games, and they publicize every single football, boys basketball game, and only, one girls basketball game, that's not okay. It shows the girls that, they're not worthy of the same publicity that boys get. So I think it's mostly a question about visibility, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And, whether it's the band being there, cheerleaders being there, more articles being written about them, like games being publicized on the website, it's still equally as important for girls to get that, just as much as the other inequities of Title IX.
Absolutely. And I do encourage everybody to go read your story because there's so much there and all the different ways that publicity plays out in high schools. Madyson?
Yeah, I actually wanted to add to that because I think when people think about the Title IX stuff going on, they kind of miss what little things could affect us. So I think a big thing that affected me was recruit. When you're trying to get recruited and you can't even tell coaches where your next game is going to be because you don't know, like that's very hard. And also, well, with my situation, when I was a freshman in high school, my first 2 years, my high school was being rebuilt. So they promised us our softball field. It was in the budget. Everything was a-okay. And then when we get to the school, there was no softball field. So that was our, like, that's how we kind of put our foot down, and we had to then play games on the football field. And Grant High School is also Grant Park, and it's a very, very big park. So we'll be having full softball games and children running across the or across the football field, like in the sand pits. Like the safety issue was very, very high. We had to put up our own fence. We had to drag out weights from our school to put on the fence. If the wind was blowing, the fence would blow down, the games would go longer. Like, it's just so many little things that people overlook that really affect like every softball player or athlete's day-to-day life.
Angela, you were nodding along. How did you handle that with Sydney?
Well, I think it was interesting what Emily said about the stuff that doesn't cost anything. That was in our lawsuit. At that time, up until about 2 weeks ago, our athletic director was also our head football coach, which really created a lot of the problems. He would use his Twitter account to promote football and this boy being recruited. And for us, it was never softball versus football. It was just treat the girls equally, give them equal things. And we put that in there so they would realize the girls deserve to be publicized just as much as the boys did. The girls won their regionals. Nothing from the school. It was just these little things that some people might laugh at, but when your daughter is seeing it over and over again and constantly ask, why isn't my sport just as important to the school as a boys' sport? That's what really got to me, and I think made us finally take that action.
Sorry, can I add something else?
Please do.
Okay. Also, so in high school, I was a 3-sport athlete. So I played softball, basketball, and volleyball. And the volleyball portion was always like kind of taken care of because in the fall, there's not a lot of indoor sports besides volleyball. But when it came down to basketball, that's when I saw more inequalities than I did in softball. And I think that's also what's really big. It's not just softball, it's every sport, every female dominated sport, especially, and that really takes a toll on women. And that's another big piece that a lot of people like they overlook.
Yes, definitely.
I want to add here, Shannon. I just realized something that I experienced yesterday that plays into what Emily was writing about. I got to walk to the softball field because I was at the baseball game, and the softball field's now right next door. I saw they were playing. You know what? I knew there was a baseball game. I didn't know there was a softball game.
Exactly.
I found out there was a softball game because I saw it. Well, you know what? 2 years ago, I never would have seen it because it would have been all the way off campus. No one would have been there. And they won. And they won in walk-off fashion against a really good team. And people see it now because it's right there on campus. People hear it, they notice it. And I got to bounce back and forth between the two games. I had students playing in both, and I got to talk about them today. But you know what? Not before, because the field was all the way across the campus, and I wouldn't have gone over there because I couldn't have walked there. So,
But you're a large
but you know
reason
what?
why that softball
I
field
did
is
know there.
there.
I did know there was a baseball game. I didn't know there was a softball game.
Kim, from a legal perspective, why do you think these issues are still happening 50 years after Title IX has passed?
Yeah, so, just also building a little bit on what folks are saying, I want to just address too, like the sense of why is this happening? Like, why are, girls struggling to have equal facilities or publicity or opportunities to play? So I just also want to contextualize, because something I've realized in my years of working in this field is that people forget that sports are co-educational and co-curricular. So, this is fundamental, but we forget that this is a campus of educating students, and sports is part of their education. So I think what would help to move things forward is like to reframe sports as part of that educational sort of microcosm, because we wouldn't have girls like sitting on the floor in the cafeteria, but boys sitting on benches, or we wouldn't give ancient textbooks to girls and new textbooks to boys. Like, so I often mention that when I do trainings, because I think that we forget like that sports aren't outside of the rubric of public education, they're within. And that's what Title IX is all about, educational equity, which includes athletics. So I'm just fascinated by how much that's forgotten, and that we also need to remember that we wouldn't like only feature boys' accolades in academics. Like, we have a great SAT score from these boys and not talk about the girls' scores. Like, so let's just try to remember that these are public resources, public facilities, public property that we all, as federal taxpayers or local taxpayers, but Title IX's hook is federal dollars, are paying for and contributing to. So that's really important to remember. But in terms of like why we're where we're at 50 years later, I mean, I can't fully say, because I'm a Title IX baby. I was lucky to play sports growing up, and so I take it for granted to some degree, because my mom and grandmother fought tooth and nail to play their sports. My grandmother played for her company team in basketball in the 1930s. She had no sport opportunity in her regular schools. And my mom was lucky to skateboard, because in LA, where she grew up, girls couldn't be kept out of skateboarding because there were no rules. So she was just inducted into the Skateboarding Hall of Fame last year, which is pretty cool. Go grandma. But my kids are pretty amazed. But she was this renegade. And so I saw my grandmother and my mom really fighting to get in. I was fortunate years later to have kind of more like, okay, there are sports teams at my middle school. There are sports teams at my high school I can actually play on. I don't have to fight for that. But I think that's another issue, is that we often think, oh, girls and women are playing. I see them on TV. I see them in my community. We're done, right? We're all set. There's this, complacency, I think, in a sense, or the sense that like, you're getting to play, you can't complain now. Like, you're just getting that chance. So why do you need exactly equal? And that's a mindset out there. It's like, well, you might have second dibs or uniforms every 10 years, but you have a uniform. So we have to really step back on mindset and just think about equity and fighting sexism and fighting discrimination, and talking about how it should be equal, and there's no excuse really. But I do think also to the reporting, I think lack of knowledge and lack of resolution tools is part of it. So girls and parents and coaches don't know their rights. Schools often don't know their responsibilities. And that's a major passion of mine, is to train everybody. I'll train first graders, in an elementary school to share about educational equity and lack of gender discrimination being important. Train, coaches, athletic directors, school staff, parents, guardians, multiple languages, multiple modes of engagement, because we just need to make sure people understand their rights and responsibilities. And we're not there yet. So, part of this project, I hope, will be launching informational tools so that we can easily send a quick video out to principals, coaches, girls, teachers, like, how do you exercise your rights? So there's a lot we can do, but I think information sharing and then where to turn. Is it to the school staff? Is it Office for Civil Rights? You can file a lawsuit if necessary, but giving people those resolution tools. I'll just lastly say, I have some happy stories in my 10 years of litigating Title IX cases. We at times would contact the school, and our focus was low-income BIPOC communities where girls couldn't get a lawyer per se or hire a lawyer. But we would write, a letter to the school and say, hey, girls don't have a locker room and boys do, or there's this really blatant inequity. And the school sometimes would say, oh my gosh, like, we were not paying attention to this. We need to fix this. And they really rapidly work to fix it. And sometimes it costs no money at all, because they just need to share the resources they have. They don't need to build something new. They just need to share the one locker room they have, which I've seen done very successfully. It just takes a Google spreadsheet and you just apportion time to all the teams. Just like if you had 2 textbooks, you would share them amongst all your students. You wouldn't just give them all to one subset. So there's a lot of creative, wonderful, well-meaning, resourceful people out there in the schools that can make a difference if they have the knowledge and they have the will. But it does take a lot of work. And unfortunately, there are stories where girls and parents and coaches are met with resistance, and we need to change attitudes, like to welcome the complaints rather than to see backlash, which is retaliation is a real issue too out there.
Shannon, can I add
Yes.
something?
Please do. Yes, please.
So this is where I want to praise you and Emily and Dr. Hyman and all the other reporters, is that hopefully your project is going to just start driving some attention and some focus on this, because unfortunately, public policy shows you through historical examples that there's a lot of tokenism, and that the school district will change just whatever they can just to get you off their back. And it didn't fix Title IX. It fixed one small little problem of Title IX violations. And until we really have a true focus and dedication to being equal, it will go piece by piece by piece by piece by piece. Instead of just saying, you know what, it's time to even the playing field. And you can see that all the way back in the 1980s when colleges finally start getting called out for not having equal scholarships. They knew about Title IX since 1972, but they waited until someone called them out on it. Hopefully you have some success stories like Kim talked about, where you just need to say, hey, what are you guys doing? And they fix it. But the problem is they'll just fix exactly what you ask. They won't fix it all. And that's hopefully this project will illuminate that and get us going after it.
Yes, thank you. Angela, I know you were active in telling your story to local media. What tools did you use to make sure that your whole story was told so that your district wouldn't try to put a Band-Aid over the issue?
Well, actually, our local media didn't report on the story at all. It was very eye-opening. Of course, Stillwater is a community of about 60,000. We have one newspaper, and that newspaper reports a lot on the boys' activities in our college here, which is Oklahoma State University. I think because of those ties, they didn't report our story. We reached out to them several times. The reason our story got noticed is because we use social media to put out pictures of our facility. The inside of our concession stand had mold growing down the walls. I mean, it was, the things that were happening were so obvious that no one would think that they shouldn't be fixed or that there was not a problem, but we were ignored, which was really unfortunate, but we pursued anyway. But it's hard when your local media doesn't seem, they either cared and just didn't want to report it and were worried about the repercussions to their own business, or maybe they really didn't see the importance of it. Hello?
I would just add quickly that, these are public facilities too. A couple things. I mean, I think sometimes, like with employment discrimination, things can happen behind closed doors or between people. It's hard to document. But it's important to remember these are public facilities. People should be able to view and tour locker rooms, athletic rooms, team rooms. I've had cases where, girls didn't know that the boys' locker room was twice as big and much better furnished because they're not in there. They don't have access and they don't need to go in there. But that raises the point that the responsibilities should be on the schools to examine and audit and get up to speed, because the girls shouldn't have to be these gumshoe investigators, looking in every cabinet and locker room and team room to figure out what's equal or not, because the girls, there's an imbalance in power, as the wonderful video you put out puts forward, is that they're youth, and so we need to also think about how to help schools examine their own facilities in a comprehensive overall way and not have one girl's team, one girl's level even of a sport having to sort of figure out and piece together the puzzle when it is the athletic director or the principal or superintendent that has access to all the data, the budgets, the team room dimensions, et cetera, uniform ordering, rotation, et cetera. So I just want to also flag that, like, to the mold growing on the wall, like, everyone can see it, and it should be a community endeavor to look at those things together and to address those things together. And the other thing I think that's a problem is that sometimes it's like always been that way. Well, girls have always played off campus, or girls never got new uniforms. And I think I even grew up with that sentiment sometimes, like, well, of course I don't travel for a tournament. The boys team always travels for tournaments, but we don't. Why would we? So we kind of, all of us have to, every single one, male allies, girls, women, everybody needs to kind of wake up from this sleepwalking that I think we've done for really thousands of years of like, oh yeah, girls and women are struggling to have equal. That's not the norm. We have to just really imagine and envision a future where it is the norm and expect that and work toward it.
Just to follow up on that, Kim, how do we continue to engage boys in this cause to create that coeducational experience?
Yeah, well, I'll just quickly say, as Emily's point about publicity and promotion, pep rallies are something that is a great opportunity where a school can feature girls and boys teams in that, say, fall or winter or spring season. And I've seen the power of boys and young men and male coaches cheering on girls and women. It is so powerful. I grew up with a brother and I was very lucky to play a lot of sports with him, and my husband and I play sports together now. And it's so powerful to have boys cheering on girls and to see, I think about the NBA teams cheering on the WNBA teams, like the Bulls cheering on the Sky, it's amazing. And so we need to also foster that. And, to Timothy's involvement, teachers need to exemplify that and say, hey, we're going to make posters for girls softball. They're in the playoffs today. Let's make sure that we all do that in this classroom together, boys, girls, everyone of any gender. So I think that we have to see role modeling from school officials, like we're going to make sure that pep rally is about girls and boys. We're going to have the boys cheering for the girls and vice versa. Because the other thing is, this is a microcosm of the world where we teach students values that they're going to take into the workplace, they're going to take into society. So if we teach them equity, gender, racial, socioeconomic, every type of equity in school, they're learning those right lessons to take that into the larger world.
Yeah, great. Tim, how have you used the story of Sydney and Danny advocating for a new field as an example in your classes now?
Well, I've been talking about it for a couple of years, but now I get to show it. In fact, I'll tell you that a number of teachers have already shown it. And so we're clarifying some Title IX. Some kids brought up some things that they thought were Title IX problems. We're like, no, that's not Title IX. That's just a problem. So at least it's in discussion. And one of the other, obviously the big parts is that Sydney and Danny got told no a few times through this process. And the thing that makes them so different than all the other projects that, well, not all the other, but many of the other projects have come about is that they didn't stop. The club that I run and the senior assignment that this was associated with, we've had other successes. We've had some laws passed about smoking on beaches and things like that. But this one was different just in the sense that their first try at this was, no, we're not going to build a field. And it was pretty much as short and sweet and to the point as that. Nope, you're not getting a softball field. And what I teach is their reaction to that. They're like, what? Do you know who you're talking to? I'm Danny Ellis. I'm Sydney Prennett, and you don't talk to us that way. It was the tone of the message. They felt very disregarded, and like, okay, so Mr. Leary, what do we do now? And my role there was just showing them the process. Okay, you've gone to this person, you've gone to that person, who's up next on the list, and how do you get through to them? They authored their own letters. The passion was obviously in their own voice, but none of that was me. That was in their hearts, and I just guided these two very motivated, dedicated students along the path. And that's what I now teach. That if you're going to come up against obstacles in your life, for instance, Title IX violations, you don't fix them by taking no for an answer. You've got to battle through this, and you can see what Madyson and Angela are going through. And honestly, I really think the only difference between our three stories is that my district had a bond. And right. And I honestly don't think my story would be any different than Angela and Madyson's if the bond wasn't there. I don't think the softball field would be here yet. In fact, to tell you the truth, part of the story that's not in there is the next year after after Danny and Sydney had graduated, two more students took up the project just to make sure that the district was sticking to their promise. And wrote letters, hey, it's still in the bond, and hey, is the bond going to pass? And they stayed on it, just in the spirit of Danny and Sydney's effort to make sure that it did come to fruition. So ultimately the story is, you're going to face obstacles like Title IX violations. Don't take no for an answer.
Well, it's a great story, and we're so grateful that you shared it with us. One more question for the panel, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for questions. What conversations do you hope we'll be having about Title IX 50 years from now on the 100th anniversary? Kim, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll be a spring chicken then, I'm sure. But my dream is to literally put myself out of business. I'm with Positive Coaching Alliance as their Gender Equity Initiative Director, and so my current focus is recruiting, retaining, supporting more girls in sports at all levels, but particularly pre-K to 12, and more women coaches, because we have about 25% women coaches in youth sports right now. As well as more coaches generally supporting girls. And so, I would just say that we need to end the need for the law effectively. I mean, yes, it's imperative now and it's a mandate, and people need that structure and that reminding and that frankly, like pressure to change because they're not doing it on their own. But the hope is to really shift. I mean, my dream is to shift culturally where it's just an expectation that you walk into that school, no matter your gender, you're going to have that team to play on. You're going to be able to exercise and enjoy the wellness and the educational, health, and lifelong, even economic benefits of playing sports. Girls who play high school sports make 7% higher wages as adults compared to their non-athlete peers. So almost like an entitlement. I think we need to think about sports access as a right that every kid, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic, should have. So my dream would be that we're not having this panel for the 100th because the problems are all solved. But I think it's going to take windows and doors. It's going to take education, enforcement, inspiration, U.S. women's soccer team being brave leaders, WNBA brave leaders, college women, March Madness leadership, an example. So it's all levels. And then I'll just lastly say, I think we need to start a lot younger. So making sure girls can get in the game and have a great softball experience when they're 6, and expect that equity is key. So Positive Coaching Alliance is really focused also on younger kids and getting them all in the game. And that's one of my passions. So yeah, a lot of to-dos for the next 50 years, but increasing information, awareness, and action are huge, tangible dreams of mine.
Thank you so much. Angela, how about you? Where do you see this conversation going?
I completely agree with what Kim said. I hope it just becomes this standard and level of expectations. In our lawsuit, we actually put a requirement that the school would have to conduct training to all the staff about Title IX every single year. And we follow up. We still have problems with them complying with the lawsuit. But that was important to us to educate everyone in the district on why there was this problem, because a lot of times it was looked at like, well, it's okay. They were teaching our daughters, well, it's okay. You're still playing. It's okay. It's okay. Well, just because it's okay doesn't mean that it's fair and it's right. So I hope that what we're doing now, it becomes this standard and this level expectation that when they walk in, everything is fair and equal. And if it's not, hopefully that we're giving our daughters and our future daughters enough ability to speak out when it's not, because I think that they have been silenced quite a bit during all of this. So I hope too that they feel empowered and that they can speak up when they need to, and it just becomes a regular occurrence. If it's not right, they're empowered to speak up and say so, and it stops right then.
Yeah, awesome. Madyson, you've been a young leader in Title IX fight. How do you hope your leadership will impact the next generation as we look ahead to future anniversaries?
I just hope that, I dream that Title IX would be a requirement and would be mandatory in teaching in schools of all ages. I think, it really needs to start young, because I was a freshman in high school and didn't know what Title IX was. And I feel like that was a time where I was maturing, or where I would see myself as mature. So for me to not even have that information at that age is kind of shocking. So definitely just education, teaching it very young, and all throughout high school. More women coaches for sure. I think if Debbie wasn't my coach, I probably wouldn't be here. We'd probably have the same circumstances that we were in a couple of years ago. And yeah, definitely having coaches take the training, that was like something I wish I would have considered when I was going through this, but that is a very good piece to add in, a dream that I wish would happen.
Yeah, definitely. And this transitions us nicely into one of the first audience questions. So if you haven't submitted an audience question and you're interested in having our panel answer it, please drop those in the chat. But Emily, I'm going to give this first one to you. And it's really for you to talk a little bit about some of your reporting teammates, but we have a question in the chat asking about model schools and some qualities that you see in schools that are living up to Title IX's promise. Could you talk a little bit about that? There was one in particular in our package that definitely fits this example.
Well, I would definitely say for the person who submitted this question, go check out, there's a whole story on a model school. So if you go and, want to look through our stories in our package, definitely read that because the reporting was really great on it. I think in a perfect world, a model school would be one that, holds their school, their educators, everyone in athletics accountable, and is also educating students on Title IX issues, and is also receptive if a girl comes and brings a complaint to their attention. Obviously, we're not quite there yet, but I think that a model school right now means that if a girl comes with a complaint, the school is open and receptive to hearing them out and then also providing an opportunity to make a change as well.
Yeah, definitely. Kim, anything you'd like to add? I see your link in the chat. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any characteristics that you see across model schools?
Yeah, I think leadership is critical. What I found is school staff change, principals come and go, athletic directors can come and go, coaches and other staff. So to build a culture that's sustainable through staff changes, a devotion to equity, regardless of who's running this or that team, is very important. And that goes back to, institutional knowledge, handbooks, having Title IX policies, having just a commitment to gender equity in your school culture, which is interpersonal in some ways. It's not just the law. It's like the principal coming to that first girls basketball game, the superintendent cheering or tweeting out about, girls softball, even if they lost every game, that they were resilient and good sports, because it's obviously not just about winning. So I think building in a culture of equity is critical, kind of from a legal technical standpoint, but also just that spirit of equity that we want our kids to embrace.
Great, and I have another question for you that I think you're best suited to answer. We have a question from JP Goldman asking, what do you do about communities such as many in Texas that build billion-dollar high school football stadiums in the race to be the biggest and the best using public funds and corporate gifts and booster club fundraising, and the impact that has on Title IX?
Yeah, I think there's ways to pivot on that in the sense that I have seen, really well-developed I'll call them football stadiums, but I like to call them sports stadiums because, they can be used for soccer, for example, or field hockey or, other, say, girls and boys sports. So I've seen schools succeed when they have gotten a lot of money, which doesn't, let me just remind everyone that booster clubs are not exempt from Title IX and football is not exempt from Title IX. And a lot of people don't know that. They're like, oh, isn't there a carve out for football? It's so hard to balance things if you have football. Nope, no Title IX exceptions for football for any level, middle, high school, college. So if you have a nice stadium, I encourage people to give to our public schools and to help with facilities development, but you have to be a referee as a school. And so if you're going to build a beautiful new stadium, let's make sure girls, boys, every kid of any gender can benefit from that. Just like we wouldn't let Microsoft donate computers just to boys, so we have to, again, get back to that educational mandate of Title IX and what the point of the education is altogether. So there's ways to make sure that arms race and say Texas football could indeed benefit all students.
Yeah, definitely. Angela, you're nodding along. Do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
Oh, I think that it was a learning process for us. Our high school has a $40 million stadium that soccer also uses it, but it was built primarily for the football team with a $2 million video scoreboard. And part of our culture here was when our 20-year-old scoreboard that was donated by the local college stopped working and we couldn't get replacement parts, the athletic director just says, it's just not pretty enough for the girls. It's this whole mentality, like those kind of comments or what they say to the girls and how they view them. It's such a big issue. Our booster club also went through an audit process. We've been preparing for this, and we ask other booster clubs to do the same because some people were getting these big gifts and it would only benefit one small segment of our student body. So.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we're running out of time, but we do have one really interesting question that I think might be a good way to wrap up our panel. And the question is, and we'll start with you, Emily, what would you say to people who say there is no point in investing in women's sports as there's not that much interest in it anyway?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the biggest misconceptions about Title IX in general, is that people think that sports like football, as we're just talking about, get more interest, and people just don't want to go to a volleyball game or a girls basketball game. I think that's interesting to say when we haven't applied equal resources to those other games. I know Mr. Leary was talking about earlier how he knew about the baseball game, but he didn't know about the softball game that was right across the field from him. And I think if we gave more equal resources, especially in publicity, but also in the way that, you know, girls are treated overall in sports, if people knew more about them, they might attend those games. And I think it was Angela who said earlier, we're not trying to pin sports against each other. This isn't a football versus girls basketball issue. This is providing equal resources so that there's the same opportunity for people to appreciate both sports in the same way. So I think that's definitely a misconception about Title IX, that if we applied more equal resources, we would have more, you know, information about people really attending those games in the first place.
Madyson, you've been a student athlete. How do you respond to this question?
I think that I don't even know, honestly. I'm trying to see which question was it?
The last one about
The
interest
last
in
one?
women's sports.
I think that even if there's no interest, everything still should be equal. And I think that's basically what Title IX is. And I also feel like if you don't have an interest into something, that doesn't necessarily mean you can turn the other way and look a blind eye to it. I definitely agree with what Emily said, though.
Awesome, thank you. Kim? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I was just also trying to type in, so I just want to flag really quickly, someone was talking about the benefits to girls of color under Title IX and
Oh,
the
yes.
lack of opportunity, say, to Black girls under Title IX in terms of enforcement and equality. So if I could just address that for a moment, because I think it's
Absolutely.
so important, is that there's a
Yes,
really good report called Finishing Last from the National Women's Law Center that came out a couple of years ago, but really is still vital today, unfortunately vital, because schools where you have like a high proportion of students of color are finding that girls of color are lacking opportunity and equity, in particular in our country. So I think maybe also going back to the other question about the next 50 years toward 100, we really need to think about who's being left behind in this framework and how to expand knowledge, education, enforcement, action, particularly for underserved, underrepresented populations. Because I think Title IX's promise is not good, is not being enforced as much in certain segments of society in the country. So sorry, I just want to pivot to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can
that's
I add
great.
on to that also?
Of course.
Yeah, I think Charles is the one that asked the question, and I could see it both ways, but I think when you really look at it, I would say no, Title IX has not been necessarily beneficial to women of color. And I think Title IX has not because Oregon is a predominantly white state and Grant High School was a predominantly white school. So there were schools that were in way worse shape than I was in and what my school went through. And the predominantly Black school in Portland, Oregon, they didn't have a softball field either. And they don't even have the funds to get a lawyer to go through with this lawsuit. So like that in itself already puts them at a disadvantage to other people. And a lot of women of color or people of color usually live in underprivileged areas. And if you're living in underprivileged areas, you don't even have the resources to even go out and get the help that you need. So I think it is a far stretch and it'll be a lot of work, but I think another dream of mine would be to like help people of color and BIPOC communities and situations.
Great, thank you so much. Angela, we've covered a lot there in the last 10 minutes. Anything you'd like to add on the interest question, on the great comments from Madyson and Kim?
I'll say two things. First, about the interest. I feel like this is kind of this catch 29 that we're in, that more people would be interested if more people knew about things that were happening. When you're in a small community and the only thing you see are Friday night lights, and the only thing you're hearing about was so-and-so boy being recruited to OSU, or so-and-so boy got to go to Baylor University, you're not promoting it in a way where younger girls get excited and their parents get excited about participating in those sports. Even when you can see the ratings on something like the College World Series, which has set records the past 2 years. So I think that if the promotion of those sports were better and those activities, then you would see more interest. And we've always offered, when our information about our lawsuit got out, we actually didn't pay for our attorney. They took our case on pro bono. We did have a strong case, which was great, but I would encourage people to, if you're passionate about it like we were, to do your best to talk to other people who have been through the process, and maybe they can point you to someone who can be an advocate or an attorney, and you might not be out those funds. And that's, in my opinion, one of the reasons why so many parents and girls don't pursue Title IX, is they're worried about how are we going to pay for an attorney, and that's unfortunate.
Thank you. Yes, thank you
Yeah,
so
if
much
I
for
could
sharing.
just add to that too, because I think that's a real issue with like folks not being able to afford representation or advocacy or training. But you know, folks can go to Office for Civil Rights with their complaints for free. As folks in this project have highlighted, the journalists, you know, it's a long process, which is really frustrating because you may not see the changes in your school while you're there. So that's something we have to work on. But I also feel like people need to be reminded retaliation is not allowed under Title IX. So it may happen, that backlash may happen, but it's important to remind school officials when you're raising a concern about, you know, a problem with the facility or an unsafe field, that they're not allowed to retaliate. And I do think, you know, documenting, writing things down can help, because their response can be recorded too, hopefully, you know, just, you know, having a paper trail of that interaction to make sure everything stays above board and that there isn't that backlash, hopefully, is key.
Thank you. And I would just say thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. We're just about out of time, but you have all shared wonderful insight and given us a lot to think about as we move forward. So thank you so much for your participation in this panel, for sharing your stories with us as part of this project. And we appreciate all of the audience members who tuned in tonight to watch this wonderful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Great job. Wonderful.